Greetings, travelers. You know exactly what I'm about to do. That's right, it's time to make a boring video about boring things that aren't as funny as what I'm most known for. When I'm not playing Final Fantasy XIV in my free time, I have other hobbies as well, such as playing other video games. Sometimes I even like to talk about those video games with other people who enjoy playing video games. This often causes me to think about stuff when it comes to game design, the meaning of life, which I already know, and the Dewey Decimal System. Some of my favorite games that I've played are Sekiro and Bloodborne. As many of my fellow travelers probably already know, I recently completed Dark Souls 3, not the DLC though, and I didn't like the game. Now that's just my opinion, and my opinion is that Sekiro is harder. But it's really simple though. My favorite thing about Bloodborne and Sekiro is parrying. That's what gets me rock hard. So, unsurprisingly, in Dark Souls 3, I like the second phase of Abyss Watchers, and both the Gundyr fights despite not liking just about anything else in the game. Now why do I bring any of this up? Because this got my train of thought to think about difficulty in games, and simply put, how I also think about difficulty in Final Fantasy XIV. In Final Fantasy XIV, you do have hardcore content. Technically extreme, usually savage, but especially ultimate. What about Eureka? It is designed to take more effort to learn compared to the normal game content where you can stroll into it completely blind and expect to clear it in one try 99% of the time. Unless it's Mist Dragon from the Burn, impossible content. It takes a bit of work to get it clear in high-end. Even the easiest high-end content requires you to do mechanics and learn it. With that being said, one thing that pisses me off are the gatekeepers of hardcore content and hardcore games in general that try and claim you need to have the biggest schlong or be able to swallow the most amount of cum to be able to clear hardcore anything. It's more like you have to be willing to put in the work in order to clear it. At the same time, it's not for everybody. Some people either don't want to put in that amount of effort or simply don't have the time to do so. You know, people who aren't me have lives outside of the game. That's okay too, especially in Final Fantasy XIV's case where it's such a small sliver of what the game has to offer that it's fine to make stuff that not everybody wants to do. Many people never buy something like a popular From Software game because they don't want to deal with it, and the creators get to decide if the impact to sales is enough to change their game to make it more widely appealing. There are plenty of minigames in FF14 like Mahjong and other gold saucer nonsense that most players never even touch. But it's there for the people who want it, and the dev team still deems it as a good use of resources. I don't really think there is any harm in trying to see if you like some niche content or not, and everyone has to start somewhere when it comes to learning more complex stuff. Great. I don't think I said anything controversial or spicy yet, so let's talk about add-ons. Final Fantasy XIV as an authority does not endorse the use of add-ons, and they are very upfront about being willing to punish players for using them. It is a sharp contrast from other MMOs especially, where add-ons can be so baked into the experience it's almost as if the developers of the game are subcontracting out essential programming to random freelancers. You don't have to fundamentally agree with the stance of the developers in this regard, just like how you don't have to fundamentally agree with the rules of anything. You do have to keep in mind, though, what the rules are. Even stuff that just changes aesthetics is considered a violation of TOS, which I think is fucking stupid, but that's how it is. Of course, this brings me to one of my greatest enemies of all time, authority. I am not a big fan. However, I don't actively use any add-ons while gaming in Final Fantasy. I definitely haven't used ACT to see how much damage I'm doing. You can't prove anything. So this is the territory of where things get weird. I don't like using things such as ACT triggers for anything, really, or using add-ons of any kind to make hard content easier. That is my personal opinion on the matter. I don't like them. The problem with this is that this is where I draw the line. I think it defeats the purpose of doing hard content when you go around the game rules to make it easier. The funny thing about the line of acceptability is that everyone draws it just below whatever they themselves do. I am not saying that's a bad thing. It's just part of human nature. I'm not exactly someone who has the best behavior in the world, and yet I don't consider my rampant fucking swearing to be problematic. The reason why you have to understand this principle is because you can't just assume that your own view of what's considered okay when it comes to add-ons is going to be the same for everyone else. That's why developers have to draw the line somewhere. It's almost arbitrary, but they have to come up with a set of rules that they expect everyone to follow. In this game's case, it's because of PlayStation support, where they can't use add-ons as easily, and they want to make sure that the playing field is even. To reiterate about 1,000 times, this is just the way that I look at it, but I consider every single annoying thing about hard content to be part of the difficulty. That includes clicking the same 3 buttons in a row consistently, paying attention to your raid buffs, reading the boss tells, and knowing how to time your cooldowns. I consider all of that to be part of the difficulty. Some people draw the line elsewhere because they think some of these factors should not be part of the difficulty. Oh, it's okay, this bot is simply doing basic callouts. It's not any different from a human player who isn't always consistent on their timings or is capable of making mistakes. Even for myself, there are things that frustrate me in high-end content. I don't like putting harder mechanics later into encounters. It's easy to make something artificially harder in my worldview by simply only allowing you to try it every hour. Fuck you, Bozja Duels. It might take you less tries, but it'll take you more time. I would love to be able to practice hard mechanics in a hyperbolic time chamber where I can get it down before incorporating it into the whole fight. That's because I played piano for a long time, and literally every music instructor ever will tell you that if you're struggling with something, you work on that part that you need to isolate, and you don't keep playing everything up until that point every single time. Even though I think about it that way, in the case of hard fights, that is part of the challenge. It does take some extra time to learn things because the endurance is also part of the experience in the developer's world. Even though it's something that I don't like and I'd consider a practice tool to be very nice and acceptable, not everyone would share that opinion. So, I don't recommend using tools to make stuff easier. I think people should be discouraged from using these type of add-ons. Here's where I throw you a curveball though. If you use these tools to make the hard content easier, I don't personally give a shit. I can't tell if people are using them in the first place, and I also don't bother to pay enough attention anyways. If you want to make your own experience easier because you don't want to deal with some aspect of the difficulty, that's your choice. However, here are a few things that piss me off. 1. If you clear with the use of add-ons, don't expect to be held in the same regard as people who clear without, just in the same way that people who clear Ultimate on release are more impressive than people who clear it after everything has already been solved. Or if you're me, only make real progress in E12S with Echo. It's not as impressive as doing it without. On the flip side, don't pretend like clearing this content with the use of add-ons is a complete joke. You still have to do things, and all the add-ons and all the advantages in the world are not going to guarantee a clear for anybody. It's still hard in many aspects. Even though I consider the use of add-ons to be a step too far, I've done Savage with Echo, or I've done content with close to best in slot gear and listened to callouts. I don't make it as hard as it can be. I just use things that are within the rules of the game, which is once again where I draw the line. It's not going to apply to every single person who plays the game. Just keep it in the back of your mind. You can get in trouble for using add-ons, and that's the risk that you're willing to take to stand by your principles. The last thing that pisses me off is people still trying to justify their position because they don't want to feel guilty about breaking the rules. Man, you really just need to own it. If you're feeling guilty, sucks to be you. People already know that they're going to be breaking the rules. One thing I hear get thrown around a lot is, what about people with disabilities? That's not the kind of argument that people seem to think it is. You're going to try to frame this in the way of, oh, you think it's fine that something is hard enough that most able-bodied people won't be able to clear it? Guess you hate disabled people. It is impossible to be against that argument unless you have no humanity left in you. But just think about this for a second. Where do you draw the line of what needs to be accessible? Are you going to get pissed at a mountain trail for being too steep for most people? How about the American Ninja Warrior obstacle course? Are we getting upset at stuff that's designed as a crazy challenge? I will always remember what one of my professors said. I wish we could give everyone A's, but if we just handed the degree to anyone, then it wouldn't mean anything. Even among all the able-bodied players in the game, most people don't clear an ultimate, myself included. That's part of the allure of clearing something like that, beyond the tangible rewards that you get in-game. There's going to be a bar that is set to make it exclusive. I think it's crazy that people are complaining about accessibility for content that's literally inaccessible by design. That is the point. Not everyone can climb every mountain. But before you get ahead of yourself, though, I think accessibility is a good thing. In fact, Final Fantasy XIV is one of the most accessible games I've ever played. You can clear basically all the normal content by doing absolutely fucking nothing. It's great. You can recommend this game to just about anybody because it's one of the game's greatest strengths. You don't have to put a ton of time into it to be able to enjoy the plot, and you don't have to be super good at the game to just have fun with friends. That's awesome. You can run around and RP while rubbing your keyboard on the side of your desk to your heart's content. Simplifying the gameplay like they have done for Shadowbringers is part of why the game has grown, as much as people want to pretend like it isn't a factor in how Final Fantasy XIV has become more popular, even without the WoW Exodus. Reducing the skill floor allows more people to play the game. Even the most recent change being made to the new icon for Sage, which only affects a small number of players, is honestly a good thing to do. The content intended to be played by literally everyone should be accessible. They should try to reduce effects that can cause seizures. They should try to make things easier for people who are colorblind. What's nice is that when the devs see something like a bunch of players using a tool for a certain mechanic, their response is usually, do we think that this is a feature that the game should already have, or did we design this mechanic harder than we intended? Maybe in the future, something as simple as an accessibility feature that just reads the cast bar of the boss could be within the realm of what they deem acceptable. I am not going to deny that add-ons can help bring about positive changes, but you cannot possibly complain that content that is marketed towards dedicated players and is advertised as being difficult to complete is not accessible to everyone. It fucking sucks when there is something that you want to do and something holds you back that is out of your control. I am not saying it's a good thing, but it's reality. Yes, I think the developers can and should make an effort to try and prevent disabilities from being a hindrance, but there's going to be an arbitrary cutoff somewhere. I have a hard time seeing the tethers on lions, but I consider that to be part of the challenge of the mechanic. I haven't completed the current Savage Rate tier, and it's been out for like a century and a half, but I'm not complaining that it's too hard. That's just the limit of what I can currently do. And don't be one of my viewers who comes to me and says that it's my teammates that are holding me back. Riddle me this. Of the people who rotate out to play with me all the time, what's the only consistent factor? If only there was some way to know. I can't fucking do it right now, but that's okay too, because I would never discourage people from trying and seeing how far you can get, because the experience can still be worth your time even if you don't complete it. I had fun running UCOB for like an hour and a half and we didn't make it very far at all. At the end of the day though, I know why some people use little cheaty things in this game. It's because many times you don't get to run things at your own pace. People not only learn things differently from one another, but also have different speeds at which they learn. Some people can just read how a mechanic works and immediately know how to execute it, while other people have to watch a video of it to understand, or if you're me, you have to physically do it in game before it makes any sense. In something like a single player experience, you can just try something over and over and over and over until you get it. But in a multiplayer game, you have at least 7 other people relying on you to perform. Nobody wants to be the person that holds back everyone else from progressing. And so, many people will get pressured into using something to make it easier for them, even though nobody is directly saying that people need to use these add-ons to succeed. They see it as a way out. It's why the hardest part of hard content is finding people who can be patient, not just with you, but also with themselves. At the end of the day, to summarize my feelings, if it gets people to run the content where you need other people to populate it, and people feel like they need these tools in order to function, just fucking do it. How else are you supposed to get a farm party going? Playing on 8 computers by yourself? But you can also probably understand why people who clear without add-ons, also known as PlayStation players, might get a little frustrated to know that they had to put more work in to get the same results and the same rewards. I'm not going to give you a definitive answer on what's right and what's wrong. I'm not your parents. I'm not going to tell you to sit up straight and to stop cursing at the dinner table. I've seen some insanely heated discussions on the issue of add-ons from both sides, and honestly, it's just pointless. Everyone has their own line for what they think is acceptable, their own idea of what's a legitimate challenge, their own limits. If someone's already using an add-on, they've probably already drawn the line somewhere else from you. But let me be clear. No one is entitled to a clear of any hard content. It's why having someone play the content for you is considered wrong by just about anyone. And it's okay to not clear something. That doesn't mean that it wasn't worth trying. It just represents the limits of what you can do right now. And I don't think it's a terrible thing to try to put some more accessibility features in the game, because that's how things improve. However, if it came down to it for me, I would rather not clear something than download a tool to make it easier. Now let's get out there and just use X plugin that makes Y mechanic a joke. Why doesn't everybody clear ultimate? Why don't you just cheat?